Well, welcome back. WMBD is your local election headquarters, and we are just weeks away from one of the biggest elections and races for governor in the history of Illinois. And joining me right now is the current governor, Bruce Rauner. Thank you so much for joining us here today and talking about these important issues as we lead up to a big day for the state and obviously a big day for you as well.
No, that's right, Eugene. It's great to be with you. Thank you for the time. This is the most important election, I think, of our lifetimes. This will determine the future of our state for a whole nother generation. It'll determine whether we change our constitution and go to a very large, high income tax, whether our districts are gerrymandered again, so we have one-party rule, as we've had for so many years. And it'll determine whether the corruption of the Chicago political machine that's been corroding our state for decades is allowed to expand, or whether we can fight back against it by standing up to it and getting term limits done.
Well, I want to start with this. You recently gave an apology of sorts on how things were ran as far as the budget impasse, looking in the past. And I want to ask you, in your statement from that, and people who are looking at you to see for re-election, I know my mom taught me when I was a kid, right? She said, you know, you never give an apology just because you want for people what they want to hear. Not saying that you did that, but you always have action after that. For people who would want to re-elect you, why should they, particularly when you look at, you know, an apology of sorts that you gave a few weeks ago?
Well, it's fair. I'm not sure I'd call it an apology. What I did is explain what happened. The truth is we had a budget impasse for 2.5 years, and I was part of that. So I say that, you know, we all let the people of Illinois down. It's unfortunate. But I do remind folks that we've been having deficit spending for decades. It was giving us huge debt and high taxes, and I pushed to stop that. The majority in the General Assembly actually had a super majority. They could have passed any budget they wanted at any time during the budget impasse. They wanted to cause the budget impasse. They could control that because they didn't want to have reforms to change government. They really wanted to push an income tax hike. Unfortunately, they prevailed. They did that over my veto. But the good news for all the people of Illinois is we now have a balanced budget. So we no longer have to have any budget impasses. Now we can make incremental change to grow the economy faster or reduce the cost of our government bureaucracy. So we're looking at a very exciting next few years.
Anything that you would do differently in approaching that conversation?
Well, what we've got to do, remember that in a bipartisan divided government, change comes slowly. We need to take incremental steps, take small steps to improve things. Don't try to do too much too quickly. So I'm proud in the past year we got $500 million in pension reform. Now I hope next year we might get that again and again, as an example. We got some modest relief for our businesses so we can grow the economy faster. I'm proud of that. We've grown 210,000 net new jobs since I became governor. And in the prior 12 years, when we had only one-party rule, we only grew 60,000 jobs. So I'm very proud of that. These are the kinds of changes that we can gradually build upon.
All right, so obviously I'm sure you're aware of the news just within the last 48 hours, really, of your opponent. There is a lawsuit now that's been filed against him. And obviously that is for people within his staff, former staffers for racial discrimination, et cetera. I want to ask you for your campaign. How is your campaign as far as diversity and people that it's employed or is utilized within it? What does that look like? Where are the different levels for people who are of color and minorities? Yeah,
well, we value diversity very much. I'm a governor for the entire state of Illinois, everyone in every community. I appointed the first Latina lieutenant governor in American history, and I'm honored the National Black Chamber of Commerce that advocates for all black businesses in the United States gave me their Fletcher Award just about a month ago as the elected official who's done more to help black business than any elected official in the United States. I'm working hard for every community. You know, Eugene, before I became governor, Illinois had the highest unemployment rate for African Americans of any state in America. It's wrong. It's a failure of our system. It's because we're not pro-business, we're not pro-growth, we're not creating enough jobs, and I've changed that. We are no longer the state with the highest unemployment rate for African Americans, and we've got a stronger and stronger economy, and we're going to build on that success.
I want to talk about HB 40. Within your party, that has been really a tense portion. A lot of people within your party didn't agree with that. If you had to go back, do you still stand by that decision, knowing that part of that is kind of what's given rise to people like a Sam McCann and a Jeannie Ives, who obviously you beat? Would you still stand by that now, knowing, in a way, kind of what it's cost within your own party?
Well, I said 5 years ago when I first ran for governor that I support a woman's right to decide and that I don't believe her income should determine whether she has that right. I said it then. I've been consistent all the way through. This election really is not about any particular bill. This election is about integrity and character, I firmly believe. And frankly, I am a volunteer. I come from a dairy farm family. My grandparents lived on a double-wide trailer. I didn't inherit a nickel, and this is my chance to give back and work for all the people of Illinois. I'm being challenged by someone who I firmly believe has not shown the integrity and character to be governor. You asked about this lawsuit that apparently some of his staff have filed against him for racial discrimination. You know, we shouldn't be surprised by that lawsuit, because when he was caught on FBI wiretap trying to influence Rod Blagojevich to give him an appointment after he donated to his campaign, on that FBI tape, he referred to elected African-American officials as offensive and talked about picking which one was the least offensive. He's used the language of racists. And then he's been caught by a Cook County Democrat Inspector General in recent weeks who did a months-long investigation of Mr. Pritzker and his property tax work with Mr. Madigan, and he determined that Mr. Pritzker fraudulently removed toilets from one of his many mansions and falsely claimed that the mansion was uninhabitable, therefore he shouldn't have to pay property taxes on it. And that Democratic Inspector General said, well, Mr. Pritzker engaged in a scheme to defraud all of us as taxpayers, and in effect defrauded us of $330,000, tax fraud, mail fraud, perjury. This shows a lack of integrity that is so consistent, unfortunately, with Mr. Pritzker's behavior, but also 4 of my 9 predecessors, Eugene, have gone to jail as governors. Mr. Pritzker shows that he's got the character to be just one of those.
All right, so we talked about the investigation into him, so I have to ask about the one that's currently into the handling of the Quincy Veterans Home as well. Several people died as a result of Legionnaire's disease and outbreak that happened there. Looking at that situation, what needed to be done differently from your administration to make sure that that did not happen? And how can people trust moving forward that something like that wouldn't happen if another outbreak or anything were that to happen, that your administration would act quicker than that?
Well, there's some misinformation out there, Eugene, about how quickly we acted. I think there's a lot of false political spin for political gain. It's tragic that the Legionella infections came into that home. We have 300 Legionella infections around the state of Illinois every year. It's heartbreaking to me. I'm a lifelong advocate for our veterans. They're our heroes. And Legionella infects elderly folks with weak immune systems, and our veterans, they are in their 90s. And so they are very vulnerable. It's tragic, but I'll say that our team did as well as they could in very difficult circumstances. Immediately they acted. There was no delay, there was no waiting. Immediately they acted to protect the veterans, treat the veterans, try to figure out the source of the infection, which is still subject to debate. We're still not sure. We've taken strong action, and now what's become clear as we've treated the water and made changes, we'll never completely remove the Legionella bacteria from that 130-year-old veterans home. So now we're going to replace the entire facility so that our veterans can have the very best modern facility.
All right. I want to kind of talk about taxes for a bit as well. That's been obviously that's always going to be a conversation within Illinois. A lot of people believe that they're taxed too much. Can you here again clearly state what is your plan moving forward when it comes to taxes and balancing out for the state?
Yes, great question. This is one of the areas where Mr. Pritzker and I are most starkly different. Mr. Pritzker is running on tax increases. He wants to raise our income tax. He's claiming it'll only be on very rich people, but it never works that way. He's proposing $11 billion in new spending. The middle class will get crushed with a very high income tax increase. And many businesses, hundreds of businesses have told me, Bruce, if the income tax goes up again in Illinois, we're leaving. The jobs will flood out of the state. He's also advocated for a vehicles miles tax. He wants to put a box in cars. And I've killed this idea in the General Assembly for 3 years. Put a box in everybody's car or truck, measure the miles they drive, and charge them a tax to drive. I'm opposed to both of those ideas. I believe rather than increasing taxes, we should grow our economy faster, reduce our taxes, reduce the regulatory burden on our businesses, and use a bigger tax base with stronger economic growth to balance our budget and get the revenue we need. To do that, we need to gradually reduce the income tax over time by getting pension reform done and health care reform, and lower our property taxes, which are among the highest in America, by getting the mandates off of our local schools and our local communities, get the mandates off from Springfield and give local control to the citizens here in Peoria or Danville or Decatur to control your own property tax levy, how contracting and competitive bidding and things are done, and how government services are shared, so we can reduce the tax burden. Then we can be more like the other states around the Midwest that are actually cutting their taxes, growing their economy fast, and actually running surpluses, and they're on the virtuous side of the cycle. That's what I want to achieve for Illinois.
All right, my final question to you is simply this. Do you believe that the state of Illinois is in a better place from when you were elected to now?
There's no question we are better off today than we were 4 years ago, but we've taken some steps back in some areas, and we have a long way to go. We've got changes in jobs, in healthcare, in criminal justice, in our education system. We've got record funding for schools and more school equity and school choice. We've done wonderful things, but we've got so much to do. Term limits and fair maps and property tax relief and growing even faster with the economy. What we can't do, never do, Eugene, is give up and fall back. My opponent, Mr. Pritzker, represents giving up and falling back. Higher taxes, more corruption. He's loyal to the Chicago political machine with the same policies that created this mess over the last 35 years. We shouldn't give up, never give up. This is home. We got to keep striving to move forward and make progress, and that's what I'm working for every day.
All right, Mr. Governor, thank you so much. Best of luck to you in a few weeks as well for this election.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Eugene.
Okay. We'll be right back.